I sat on the balcony of our modest apartment, the soft glow of the setting sun casting a golden hue across the room. The gentle breeze played with the curtains, creating a calming rustle that mingled with the faint sound of distant traffic. It was one of those perfect evenings that made me grateful for everything I had, especially for my wife, Jessica. We had been married for 5 wonderful years, and it felt like just yesterday we were standing in front of our closest friends and family, promising to share our lives. Jessica was the light in my life, an artist with a passion for painting, her colorful canvases hanging proudly on our walls, each one telling a story that resonated with both of us. That evening, we had planned a cozy dinner. I had taken the time to whip up her favorite dish, a creamy mushroom risotto, while Jessica set the table with our best dinnerware. The aroma filled the air as we clinked our wine glasses, sharing smiles and laughter over a meal that felt like a celebration of our love. "Remember that time we went hiking in the mountains?" Jessica asked, her eyes sparkling with nostalgia. "We got lost for hours, but it didn't even matter. We just laughed it off and made the best of it." I chuckled, the memory flooding back. "Of course, I thought we were going to be stuck out there forever. But you were so determined to find the way back, like a true adventurer." She leaned closer, resting her chin on her hand, her gaze fixed on me. "You know, that's what I love about us. We can turn any situation into an adventure. No matter where we are or what we're doing, as long as we're together, everything feels right." Her words wrapped around my heart like a warm blanket. We talked about our future dreams, traveling to distant lands, starting a family, and perhaps even moving to a bigger place where we could have a garden. The plans flowed freely, painting a vivid picture of what we envisioned together. "I can see us in a little house with a white picket fence," I said, dreaming aloud. "Kids running around, and you out in the garden, tending to your flowers." Jessica laughed, her voice melodic and light. "And you'll be there, building treehouses and playing with them." "It sounds perfect." As the evening wore on, we moved to the couch, where we curled up under a soft blanket. The world outside faded away as we got lost in conversation about our favorite books, movies, and the little quirks that made each of us unique. Every shared story, every inside joke, solidified the bond we had built over the years. But as I looked at her, my heart full of love, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the surface. It was a whisper in the back of my mind, a nagging thought I pushed away, not wanting to tarnish this beautiful moment. Little did I know, the world I cherished so dearly was about to unravel, and the woman I loved would soon become a stranger. For now, though, all that mattered was the warmth of her presence beside me and the dreams we shared. I leaned in, planting a soft kiss on her forehead, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to break. As the days turned into weeks, the golden glow of our perfect life began to dim, replaced by an unsettling shadow that crept into my heart. I first noticed the change in Jessica's behavior during one ordinary Tuesday evening. She returned home late, the soft sound of the key turning in the lock echoed in the quiet of our apartment, and I looked up from my computer, expecting to see her smiling face. But when she walked in, something was off. Her eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine as she quickly made her way to the kitchen. The usual warmth in her gaze had been replaced by a flicker of unease, and my heart sank. "Hey, you're late," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Everything okay at work?" "Yeah, just a few last-minute meetings," she replied, brushing me off with a distracted smile. She poured herself a glass of water and avoided eye contact as if I were a stranger rather than her husband. I could feel a knot tightening in my stomach. The next few weeks continued this way. Jessica started spending more time at work, often leaving early in the morning and returning home well after dark. At first, I thought nothing of it. After all, she was an ambitious artist, and her gallery was preparing for an upcoming exhibition. I wanted to support her, to be the understanding husband who encouraged her dreams. But soon, my supportive demeanor turned into silent frustration. I missed our evenings together. Those moments we once cherished, filled with laughter and stories. Now, the only sounds that filled our home were the faint clicks of her heels as she hurried past me, her mind seemingly elsewhere. I began to notice subtle changes in her behavior. She started taking her phone with her everywhere, even to the bathroom, which had never been an issue before. When I'd ask her about her day, her responses became vague, lacking the detail and enthusiasm they used to have. The art she once poured her soul into now felt like a distant memory, replaced by a growing distance between us. One evening, as I sat in our living room, I heard her phone vibrate on the coffee table. A message lit up the screen, displaying the name of a contact I didn't recognize, Adam. My heart raced as I debated whether to look. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but a surge of instinct compelled me to check. Instead, I took a deep breath and forced myself to look away, hoping I was just being paranoid. But the doubts festered. I began to replay our conversations in my head, scrutinizing every word. Had she always talked about Adam? It felt like a name that had crept into our lives uninvited. I remembered her mentioning him casually, how he was a young programmer who had recently joined her team. I pushed the thoughts aside, convinced they were unfounded. Still, the nagging feeling lingered. I started to keep track of the days she stayed late and the times she seemed distracted. I noticed little things, the way she'd laugh at messages on her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. Or the way her cheeks flushed when I mentioned her colleague's name. Each instance added another layer to my unease, like bricks forming a wall between us. I tried to confront her, but every time I opened my mouth, the words felt heavy and clumsy. "Is everything all right, Jess? You seem different." But she would smile, brush it off as stress from work, and I'd feel the weight of my doubts return. Then came the day I decided to confront the truth head on. I was sitting at my desk, my heart racing with the realization that I could no longer ignore the signs. The world around me seemed muted as I focused on the feeling of betrayal I had yet to acknowledge. At that moment, I resolved to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room. As I glanced at Jessica in the kitchen, her back turned to me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her. The laughter, the dreams, and the love we had once shared were slipping through my fingers like sand. I was left with only suspicion and a growing dread that I was on the brink of discovering something that could shatter my world completely. It was a rainy Friday evening when I found myself pacing around our apartment, my thoughts swirling like the storm outside. Jessica had once again left for work. Her excuse was a last-minute meeting that would keep her late. As the sound of raindrops tapped against the window, I felt a growing sense of unease gnawing at me. I could no longer ignore the feeling that something was wrong. In a moment of desperation, I decided to tidy up the living room, hoping to distract myself from the dark thoughts that consumed me. As I picked up a few magazines from the coffee table, my eye caught the glow of Jessica's phone, sitting abandoned on the couch. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. The urge to know what was happening in her life became overwhelming. I told myself I wouldn't snoop, I respected her privacy. But curiosity got the better of me. I picked up her phone, the screen still lit up, displaying a string of notifications from various apps. My fingers hovered over the screen, my heart racing with the adrenaline of my decision. As I scrolled through her messages, I felt a pit forming in my stomach. There were texts from friends, plans for the weekend, and then, there it was, an unfamiliar name. Adam. The mention of him sent a jolt of electricity through me, igniting the fears I had tried to suppress. My pulse quickened as I opened the conversation. What I found made my heart drop. The messages were casual at first, discussing work and projects, but then they took a turn that made my blood run cold. Jessica and Adam exchanged flirty banter that left no room for misunderstanding. Compliments about each other's looks, playful emojis, and inside jokes that I had never heard of flooded the screen. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut, each word cutting deeper. As I continued to scroll, my breath hitched in my throat. There were photos too. Selfies of Jessica taken in what appeared to be a dimly lit bar, her laughter frozen in time. And then there was Adam, his arm casually draped around her shoulder, both of them grinning like they shared a secret the rest of the world was excluded from. My heart raced as anger surged through me, hot and consuming. I quickly closed the messages, my hands trembling. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breath. I felt sick to my stomach, a whirlwind of emotions crashing over me. How could she do this? How could she betray everything we had built together? The dreams we shared, the laughter we once had, now seemed to hang by a thread, ready to snap. Yet, deep down, a small voice urged me to hold off on jumping to conclusions. Maybe I was misinterpreting the context of their conversations. Maybe it was harmless. I desperately wanted to believe that there was a reasonable explanation, something that could bring my heart back from the brink of despair. But the images flashed in my mind, taunting me, and leaving me with a sense of impending doom. For the next hour, I sat on the couch, my thoughts a chaotic storm. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that settled in my chest like a stone. I tried to reason with myself, telling myself not to overreact, but the more I replayed the images and messages in my head, the more my anger grew. What infuriated me most was that Jessica hadn't even bothered to hide it. She'd left her phone out in plain sight as if she didn't care if I saw. Did she think I wouldn't notice? Did she assume I'd just accept her late nights and vague explanations? When she finally walked through the door hours later, her hair damp from the rain, I felt a rush of emotions bubble to the surface. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I bit my tongue. I knew that if I unleashed my fury now, it would only lead to a confrontation I wasn't ready for. Instead, I plastered on a smile, a mask that hid the turmoil inside me. "Hey, you're back," I said, trying to keep my tone light, even though my heart was racing. "How was the meeting?" "Long," she replied, shaking off her umbrella and placing it by the door. "But I got a lot done. I was just thinking about dinner. Are you hungry?" As she moved into the kitchen, I watched her, feeling like a stranger in my own home. She seemed blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I wanted to reach out to her, to pull her into a warm embrace, but the weight of my discovery held me back. That night, I lay in bed beside her, the silence thick and heavy. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal, anger, and confusion. I stared at the ceiling, the soft glow of the bedside lamp illuminating the cracks above me. I wanted to believe that our love was strong enough to overcome this, but doubt crept in like a thief in the night, leaving me more restless than ever. As Jessica drifted off to sleep, her breath steady and calm, I found myself facing the harsh reality of our situation. The accidental discovery had shattered my world, and I knew that soon I would have to confront the truth. A truth that could either bring us back together or tear us apart forever. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the room. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind still racing from the revelations of the previous night. Jessica lay beside me, her breathing calm and even, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I knew I couldn't keep this inside any longer, it was eating away at me, and I felt like a caged animal ready to lash out. As I turned to her, the weight of what I had discovered crashed over me once more. My heart raced with anxiety and anger, and I could feel the words bubbling up inside me, desperate to escape. Finally, I took a deep breath and shook her gently. "Jess," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." She stirred, blinking sleepily, and I watched as confusion crossed her face. "What time is it?" she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. "It doesn't matter," I replied, my tone sharper than I intended. "I found something last night. We need to discuss it." The look in her eyes shifted from confusion to concern as she sat up, pulling the blanket tightly around her. "What do you mean?" I took a moment to gather my thoughts, the images from her phone flashing in my mind like a slideshow I couldn't turn off. "I found messages on your phone, texts between you and Adam," I said, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. "The way you two talk, it's not just professional. It's more than that." Her face paled, and for a brief moment, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. "Tom, I can explain," she pleaded, her hands clasped together in her lap. "You have to understand, it's not what you think." I felt a surge of frustration rise within me. "Then what is it, Jess? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're having an affair with your colleague." Affair? She echoed, her voice rising slightly. "No, it's not like that at all. Adam is just a friend. We joke around, it doesn't mean anything. Friends don't send each other flirty messages and take selfies together." I shot back, my voice laced with bitterness. "You've been acting distant, secretive. And now I find this? How am I supposed to believe you?" Tears welled in her eyes, and she looked genuinely hurt. "I didn't mean for you to find out this way. It was all innocent, I swear. I'm just stressed at work. And Adam has been supportive. It doesn't mean I'm in love with him or anything." "Supportive?" I scoffed, unable to hide my disbelief. "It sounds like you're using him as a substitute for something that's missing between us." "How long has this been going on, Jessica?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the blanket. "It's not like that. It started as a friendship, and then we clicked, you know? But I love you, Tom. You're my husband." Hearing her say those words sent a wave of anguish through me. I wanted to believe her, to trust her, but the evidence was glaring. "Do you even realize how much this hurts me?" How could you let it go this far? I didn't want to hurt you. She cried, her voice cracking. I thought I could keep it under control, but it got complicated. I never wanted to betray you, I promise. The pain of her betrayal felt like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. But you did, Jess. You let it happen. You let him in, and you didn't even think to tell me. We sat in silence for a moment, the tension between us thickening like fog. I could feel the anger boiling beneath the surface, but alongside it was a deep sadness, a sense of loss for the trust we had once shared. Finally, I stood up, unable to sit there any longer. I needed space, to think, to process what had just happened. I can't do this right now, I said, my voice steady but hollow. I need time to figure out what I want. Tom, please don't walk away like this, she pleaded, her voice shaky. I want to fix this. I'll do anything to make it right. But I was already moving toward the door, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and heartbreak. I didn't want to hear her promises, they felt empty, like words tossed into the wind. I stepped out into the living room, the walls of our home suddenly feeling alien and unwelcoming. As I paced back and forth, my heart raced with a mixture of anger and sorrow. I had to get to the bottom of this, to uncover the truth behind her words. I couldn't trust her anymore, the bond we once shared felt irrevocably shattered. I decided I would take matters into my own hands. If Jessica wouldn't be honest with me, then I would investigate this myself. I had the skills to uncover the truth. I would dig deeper into her relationship with Adam, not just for my peace of mind but to understand how deep this betrayal truly ran. With my heart heavy and my mind focused, I knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. But one thing was certain. I would find out the truth, no matter the cost. I owed it to myself to know whether our love was worth fighting for or if it had already slipped away, leaving nothing but wreckage in its wake. The following days passed in a blur of emotions. I was consumed by a storm of rage, confusion, and betrayal. Jessica went about her daily life, but I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom each time she walked out the door. The thought of her being with Adam, laughing and sharing intimate moments, burned like acid in my stomach. In my mind, the only way to find clarity was to confront the truth. I had always been good with technology, a skill honed over years of programming and cybersecurity work. It was time to put those skills to use in a way I never imagined I would have to. I needed to follow Jessica and Adam, to find out exactly what was happening behind my back. After work, I began my surveillance. I set up a hidden camera near our apartment entrance and downloaded a tracking app that would allow me to see her movements in real time. I felt like a detective in a movie, except this was all too real, and my heart raced with each new notification that lit up my screen. The first few days of watching her were agonizing. Jessica seemed oblivious to my presence. She went to work, met up with friends, and returned home each evening. But then, the patterns began to emerge. I noticed she was frequently leaving work later than usual, often telling me she had late meetings or projects to finish. Each time she left the office, my heart would race with dread, knowing she might be meeting Adam. On Thursday evening, I decided to follow her. I waited until she left our apartment, then grabbed my jacket and slipped out the door behind her. I trailed her discreetly, keeping my distance while trying to remain inconspicuous. I felt like a ghost, lurking in the shadows, but I was driven by the need to uncover the truth. As I followed her, my heart raced with anxiety. I watched as she entered a trendy downtown bar. My pulse quickened, and I parked my car across the street, hoping to blend into the evening crowd. The minutes felt like hours as I waited, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Eventually, she emerged with Adam, and my heart sank. They were laughing together, their body language unmistakable. I watched them walk side by side, their chemistry palpable. It was a sight that shattered my heart all over again. They stepped into a nearby cafe, and I followed, keeping my distance while still attempting to observe. Inside, they sat at a corner table, their voices low, but the spark between them was evident. I strained to catch snippets of their conversation, and my heart sank further as I saw them lean in closer, sharing intimate smiles and lingering glances. The truth was unfolding before my eyes, more painful than I could have ever imagined. As I watched them interact, I felt an overwhelming sense of rage bubble within me. The reality of my worst fears was confirmed. They were more than just friends. Jessica was allowing this to happen, and Adam was a willing participant in her betrayal. I left the cafe, feeling suffocated by my emotions. I needed to get out of there, to breathe, but the anger coursing through me had transformed into something more dangerous. The desire for revenge began to take root in my mind, growing stronger with each step I took away from that cafe. Back in my apartment, I felt like a volcano ready to erupt. I paced back and forth, my mind racing with thoughts of what I had just witnessed. Jessica's laughter with Adam echoed in my mind, and each memory of our shared life together was tainted with betrayal. How could she do this to us? To me? I sat down at my desk, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I needed a plan, a way to make them feel the pain I was experiencing. I thought about my skills as a programmer and how I could use them to my advantage. Adam had to pay for his role in this betrayal, and I was determined to expose him for what he was, a liar and a thief of my happiness. I opened a new project on my computer and began crafting my plan. I would hack into Adam's accounts, his email, social media, anything I could get my hands on. I had spent years working in cybersecurity, and I knew all the tricks to bypass security measures. I wouldn't stop until I had uncovered everything I needed to ruin his life. My heart raced with exhilaration as I began. I started by gathering information on Adam, piecing together bits from Jessica's messages and what I knew from his work at the same company. With a few searches, I found his LinkedIn profile, which led me to his email address. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding with adrenaline. From there, I used a simple phishing scheme to gain access to his email. I crafted a fake email that looked like it came from our company's IT department, warning him about a potential security breach and urging him to verify his credentials. It took only a few moments before I received an alert that he had clicked the link. With access to his email, I rifled through his messages, uncovering conversations that would make anyone cringe. The exchanges between him and Jessica were particularly painful to read, filled with flirtations and plans for their next meeting. Each message I uncovered fueled the fire of my rage, propelling me forward in my quest for revenge. Next, I delved into his social media accounts. I knew how to navigate through privacy settings and restrictions to uncover his personal information. As I sifted through his posts and pictures, I found things that could destroy his reputation, a slew of inappropriate comments, embarrassing photos, and revealing personal details he had shared over the years. As I compiled the evidence, I felt a sick sense of satisfaction wash over me. I was going to unleash hell on him, to expose everything and watch as he lost everything he held dear. He would regret ever crossing paths with Jessica, and more importantly, he would learn the consequences of his actions. My fingers flew over the keyboard as I worked late into the night. Piecing together everything I had discovered, I began to draft a post that would lay bare all of Adam's secrets for the world to see. I would make sure it went viral, sending shockwaves through his personal and professional life. As the clock ticked on, I felt a dark sense of empowerment swell within me. I was no longer the victim, I was the one in control. This was my chance to reclaim my dignity and expose the betrayal that had torn my life apart. The plan was in motion, and soon, Adam would understand the consequences of his actions. I took a moment to step back and breathe, the weight of my plan settling over me like a heavy cloak. I knew I was crossing a line, but the rage and pain I felt drove me forward. Justice would be served, and the truth would be unveiled. All I had to do was pull the trigger. It was a chilly Saturday morning when I finally finished my plan. After days of meticulous work, I was ready to unleash the storm I had been brewing inside me. The satisfaction I felt as I prepared to execute my revenge was exhilarating. I had gathered more than enough compromising material on Adam, enough to dismantle his life, piece by piece. I created a fake social media account, carefully crafting a profile that would blend into the crowd. I chose a name that sounded believable, someone who could be an acquaintance of Adam but not too close. I made sure to use a profile picture that looked professional yet unremarkable, someone who wouldn't raise suspicions. With the profile set up, I was ready to make my move. With a few clicks, I began posting the content I had collected. I started with the more innocuous material, sharing snippets of his questionable conversations, screenshots of his flirtatious messages with Jessica, and those embarrassing photos that exposed him for who he was. I crafted each post to be eye-catching, using provocative captions that would spark curiosity and outrage. "Look what this guy is really like when the camera isn't on." #double life I typed, adding a snapshot of Adam grinning with a drink in his hand, oblivious to the chaos that was about to ensue. As the posts began to circulate, I felt a rush of adrenaline. Each notification from the fake account was like fuel to the fire. I watched as friends and colleagues of Adam started to engage with the posts, commenting in disbelief, and sharing them with others. It was happening. The seed of destruction was being planted, and I was the one watering it. I sat back in my chair, my heart racing with anticipation. I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of glee as I observed the reactions unfolding on my screen. People began tagging Adam in the posts, questioning him about the content. Some were laughing, while others were genuinely horrified. A few friends even reached out to him directly, trying to confirm if it was true. As the hours passed, the engagement on the posts grew. It became a feeding frenzy. People love drama, especially when it involves betrayal and scandal. I watched in satisfaction as more and more people joined the conversation, their comments filled with outrage and shock. "Is this true? How could he do this?" One friend wrote, and another chimed in, "I always thought he was better than that." The sense of community outrage only amplified the chaos. It was everything I had hoped for and more. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, I received a message from an old acquaintance of Adam's. "Dude, did you see what's happening? People are saying you've been cheating on Jess with someone from work. This is crazy." A surge of joy washed over me. The web I had spun was tightening around him, and I couldn't help but revel in the thought of his impending downfall. I knew he would have to face Jessica soon, and the confrontation that would follow would be explosive. But I wasn't finished yet. I decided to escalate things further, releasing more sensitive information. I posted screenshots of his private conversations, showing him making inappropriate jokes and comments about colleagues. I included a few messages that exposed his disregard for professional ethics and integrity, pushing the narrative that he was not only a cheater but also untrustworthy in his job. With each new post, I felt an intoxicating high. I was the architect of this chaos, the one pulling the strings, and it felt empowering. I could hardly contain my excitement as I imagined the conversations happening behind closed doors at the company where Adam worked. Would he be fired? Would he lose the respect of his peers? As evening fell, I received an alert that the posts had been shared beyond my expectations. They were starting to spread like wildfire, igniting discussions across multiple platforms. I had unwittingly turned Adam into a public figure, but not one that anyone would want to emulate. He was the embodiment of betrayal, a cautionary tale for anyone who dared to trust him. At that moment, I realized that I had crossed a line. The thrill of revenge had morphed into something darker, something I couldn't ignore. It was exhilarating to watch, yes, but I also felt a twinge of guilt creeping in. This was a man's life I was ruining, his career and reputation. But then I remembered the betrayal, the way Jessica had allowed it to unfold, and the anger surged back. I told myself that Adam had made his choices, he had brought this upon himself. This was his reckoning, a deserved consequence of his actions. The hours passed, and I continued monitoring the situation, watching as the fallout unfolded. Around midnight, I finally decided to close my laptop, my mind racing with the excitement of the day. I knew I had set off a chain reaction that couldn't be undone. Tomorrow would bring more chaos and more revelations, and I was ready to watch it all unfold. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a strange mix of emotions swirling within me: victory, anger, and a creeping sense of emptiness. I had achieved what I set out to do, but at what cost? I drifted off to sleep, knowing that while I had ignited this fire, it was just the beginning of the inferno that would consume Adam and Jessica. And I was right in the middle of it, watching it all burn. The following days unfolded like a dark cloud hanging over me, each moment heavy with the weight of what I had set in motion. I was glued to my screen, refreshing social media pages, watching as Adam's life began to unravel in real time. News of his unprofessional behavior and scandalous messages spread like wildfire. It wasn't long before I saw the first post confirming what I had only imagined: Adam had been fired from his job. I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction as I read the comments pouring in. What a loser. He deserved it. How could anyone trust him again? Each notification felt like a punch of vindication, but deep down, I felt something else brewing, a gnawing emptiness I couldn't quite shake. Days turned into a blur of headlines and gossip. Adam's personal life began to crumble just as dramatically as his career. I witnessed the fallout firsthand when Jessica confronted me about the situation. She stood in the doorway one afternoon, her eyes red and puffy from crying. I could tell she was desperate to talk, but I wasn't ready to hear her explanations or apologies. "Tom, please," she said, her voice trembling. "You have to listen to me. This isn't what I wanted. I never thought it would come to this." I crossed my arms, leaning against the kitchen counter, my expression stone cold. "What did you think would happen, Jess? Did you think you could have it both ways without consequences? You let this happen. I know I messed up," she admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't want Adam to lose everything. I was just what?" I cut her off, anger boiling over. "You were just having an affair while I was at home, believing in us? You were living a lie, and now look at what your choices have caused. It's not just Adam who's hurting. You don't get to play the victim here." Her shoulders slumped, and she looked defeated, but I was past the point of sympathy. I turned away, unable to face her anymore. I didn't want to hear her justifications or see the remorse in her eyes. It was too late for that. She had crossed a line, and in my anger, I had crossed one as well. Over the next few weeks, Adam's fall from grace became the talk of the town. I followed every detail, horrified and exhilarated at the same time. He was evicted from his apartment, shunned by friends, and even his family distanced themselves from him. I couldn't help but feel a sense of power as I watched his life spiral into chaos. He had been the architect of his downfall, and I had simply provided the match. But as the days dragged on, the satisfaction I once felt began to fade. I could no longer ignore the emptiness that had settled in my chest. I watched as Adam struggled to find a new job, his self-esteem crushed beneath the weight of public shame. I began to see the pain etched on his face in the photographs that circulated. The reality of what I had done sunk in. This wasn't just a game, it was real life. With real consequences. The mirror of my actions reflected not just Adam's ruin but also my disillusionment. I had sought revenge, but I hadn't considered the fallout it would bring. Jessica and I were still living together, but the emotional distance had grown into a chasm. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was filled with tension and unspoken words. I felt trapped in a life that had become unrecognizable, and I couldn't blame anyone but myself. One night, I found myself sitting alone in the dark, scrolling through social media. Posts about Adam's downfall continued to flood my feed, but instead of the thrill I once felt, a heaviness settled over me. I came across a picture of him looking despondent at a coffee shop, his head in his hands. The image struck me harder than I expected. This wasn't just a face I wanted to see suffer. This was a person, a human being, broken and lost. It was then that the weight of my actions came crashing down on me. I had been blinded by rage, driven by a need for retribution. But now I was left with nothing but regret. In my quest to destroy someone else, I had also tarnished my soul. I looked at my life and saw how the cycle of hatred was consuming me, leaving me hollow and resentful. I knew I had to make a choice, to continue down this path of bitterness or to find a way to reclaim my life. The thought of holding onto this anger felt exhausting, like dragging a heavy weight everywhere I went. I wanted to be free, to move forward, but how could I when I was still clinging to the past? The next day, I made a decision. I sat down with Jessica and finally confronted the mess we were in. "We can't keep living like this," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This situation is toxic for both of us. We need to figure out what we want moving forward." She looked at me, surprise flickering in her eyes. "Are you saying we can fix this?" "I don't know if we can," I admitted, "but I do know that holding on to this anger is killing us both. I can't keep punishing you for what happened. And I don't want to keep punishing myself either." Her expression softened, and I could see the vulnerability in her eyes. "I'm so sorry for everything, Tom. I've been feeling lost, and I know I hurt you more than I can say. But I want to work on this, if you'll let me." It wasn't an easy conversation, and we both had a lot to unpack. But as we spoke honestly about our feelings, I began to feel a sense of relief. We were acknowledging the hurt, the mistakes, and the betrayal, but we were also opening the door to healing. I still felt the sting of what had happened, but instead of letting it consume me, I realized I could use it as a catalyst for growth. I didn't have to be defined by revenge. I could choose to build a better future, even if it meant moving forward alone. As time passed, I found myself letting go of the hatred I had harbored. It wasn't an easy journey, but slowly, I began to rebuild my life, focusing on what truly mattered. I channeled my energy into work, rediscovered my passion for programming, and even started volunteering to help others in need. Adam's name faded from my thoughts, and while I would never forget the pain of betrayal, I no longer felt the need to hold on to it. I had taken back control of my life, and with each passing day, I felt lighter and freer. In the end, revenge had given me nothing but chaos. It was in the act of choosing to forgive, not only Jessica but also myself, that I found the path to healing. It was a lesson I would carry with me forever, that sometimes the hardest battles we face are not against others but within ourselves. As the weeks turned into months, I realized that moving on was not a linear journey. There were days when the memories of Adam and Jessica's betrayal would surface, accompanied by a familiar wave of anger and sadness. However, I had developed healthier coping mechanisms. I began journaling my thoughts and feelings, allowing myself to process the pain without letting it consume me. Each entry became a release, a way to confront the emotions that would otherwise linger. In time, I found clarity in my writing, understanding that while I couldn't change the past, I could shape my future by focusing on the present and the opportunities it held. As I continued to prioritize my healing, I also found new avenues to reconnect with my friends and family. I started organizing regular gatherings, inviting people over for game nights and dinners, and rediscovering the joy of companionship. I realized how much I had isolated myself during my obsession with revenge. And rebuilding those connections enriched my life in ways I hadn't anticipated. With each shared laugh and heartfelt conversation, I felt a sense of belonging returning to me. I began to understand that true strength lies not in retaliation but in resilience, in choosing to rise above hurt and embrace the possibilities ahead.